So virtual gavel and read the sunshine notice. So this is the Wednesday, May 5th, 2021 meeting of the Franklin Township Planning Board. Franklin Township is operating under a declaration of state and local emergency due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. It has been determined that the public's attendance at meetings of the planning board will pose a risk to their health, safety, and welfare. Therefore, this meeting has been relocated from the council chambers at the Franklin Township Municipal Building to a virtual meeting format and is being conducted utilizing virtual remote telecommunications equipment in conformance with the directives of the state of New Jersey. The relocation of this virtual meeting of the planning board was posted on the township's official newspaper, the Courier News, on the township website and on exterior doorways of the municipal building. This notice detailed the following means of public participation. Link to the virtual meeting via WebEx or call-in number for those without internet access. Public inspection of application materials was made available via the township website and or appointment in a municipal building. Formal action may be taken at this virtual meeting. As a reminder to board members, please mute yourselves unless you wish to speak or to provide a vote. Please withhold questions until all of the applicant's witnesses have finished presenting, at which time the chair will ask the board for comment. For public input, for those members of the public that are watching via WebEx who wish to speak, there are two options. You can press the raise hand button. To use this feature, click on the participants icon in the lower right corner of your screen, which will open a new participants window on the right side of your screen. In the lower right-hand corner of that window will be a hand icon. Click on that hand icon, or use the chat function. Either use the default, which is everyone, or chat Mark Healy. Do not send the message to Christine Woodbury as she is unable to review messages during the meeting, and do not use the Q&A in that section. Will not be checked during the meeting. For those members of the public that are listening via the call-in number who wish to speak, please press *3. At the appropriate time in the meeting, township staff will announce your name, unmute you, and you'll have opportunity to provide comment. Please provide your name and address. If providing a statement, the board attorney will swear you in. After speaking, if you're on the WebEx, please press the lower hand button. If calling in, press *3 again. Okay, and with that, we go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, call the roll.
Councilman Chase?
Here.
Paul Houck?
Here.
Mahir Rafiq?
Here.
Jennifer Ragnow?
Here.
Dr. Mansray? Charles Brown?
Here.
Robert Thomas? Nope. Carol Schmidt?
Here.
Sammy Shalom? And Chairman Orsini.
Here. Okay, so let's see. We have, first of all, the minutes of the regular meeting from April 7th, 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve those. Did I hear a motion? Yes, I did. All right, I'll move to approve.
Second.
Oh, on page 7 of the minutes, paragraph 2, line 4 from the bottom. The word should be now, not rather than not.
What did you say?
Page 7, second, the fourth line from the bottom, the first word of the line, I think it should be now rather than not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You see what I'm talking about?
I have a reputation to live up to, apparently.
You're still not getting any jelly beans. You missed the first one.
Yeah, so Christine, that sentence on page 7 starts on the bottom of the second paragraph. In total, Mr. Schmidt told the board that they would not have a total of 31 parking spaces on the site. So I think it should read now have a total of 31.
Given the final clause about meeting the park requirement.
Okay. Any other corrections? Ted, that you noticed?
No, nothing?
Okay. So,
So,
I'll once
Mr.
again move those amended minutes.
And then
Sorry.
Mr. Brown said second, right?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Chase.
Yes.
Paul Howe.
Yes.
Mahir Rafik.
Yes.
Jennifer Wagner.
Yes.
Charles Brown.
Yes.
Carol Schmidt.
Yes.
And Chairman Orsini.
Yes. We have 2 resolutions tonight. First is Elizabeth Realty Partners, LLC, PLN 21-00001. I'll move that. Does anybody want to second it, please?
I'll second.
Councilman Chase.
Yes.
Paul Howe.
Yes.
Mahir Rafik.
Yes.
Jennifer Wagner.
Yes.
Charles Brown.
Yes.
Carol Schmidt.
Yes.
And Chairman Orsini.
Yes. And the second resolution we have is 3 Ronson, LLC, PLN 20-00012. I'll make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
Councilman Chase.
Yes.
Paul Howe.
Yes.
Mahir Rafik.
Yes.
Jennifer Wagner.
Yes.
Charles Brown.
Yes.
Carol Schmidt.
Yes.
And Chairman Orsini.
Yes. I assume no discussion items, so we'll move into general public comment. So I'll make a motion to open to the public for general planning comment that is not subject to a separate hearing tonight. Can I get a second for that?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is now open for general public comment.
As indicated by the chairman, the meeting is open for any comments of a general planning nature, not related to a hearing later tonight. If you have any comments, you can raise your hand in WebEx, or if you're calling in, you can press *3. We'll ask that you identify yourself, spell your last name, and give your address.
I do see a
Call-in number. Let's see.
code 407.
I'll unmute.
Hand just went down.
Okay.
Scared him.
Now it's
Okay, area code 407. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, Christopher Brocious, that's spelled Brosius, from 28th Central Avenue. I just want to make you aware that this WebEx is not working. I registered ahead of time, but I cannot get on the WebEx.
Right now, sir.
I'm on my telephone, so it's a little bit disconcerting because I wasn't really sure. But I didn't know if you were aware that WebEx is giving some people trouble. That's my immediate comment. I don't think we're on the library thing yet, are we?
We do have 29 people on WebEx,
so I'm not sure.
Let me explain something to you, sir.
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to see or hear you anyway. When you come into our WebEx meeting, you're in an attendee, which is considered like a holding room. So you may be talking and trying to see people or waving your hands, and we won't be able to see you. It's not until, as you just heard Mr. Orsini open to the public, and then Mr. Healy was able to see your hand rise up and go down and come back up, and then he called on you, and now we can hear you just clearly. So that's why we couldn't see or hear from you in the beginning. But as Mark said, we have 38 people on WebEx, so it is working and functioning well.
Okay, I didn't understand it. That's why I questioned it. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you, sir.
Again,
Ask that more don't speak to these people.
if you do that,
Your hand down via WebEx.
Hand down. All right. So apparently we have somebody else with their hand up.
It's still that same gentleman.
With his hand up. So, Mr. Chairman, I do not see anybody
Else
else
with their hand?
their hand raised at this time.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So make a motion to close the meeting to the public.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, meeting is now closed. So the first hearing tonight, Franklin Township PLN 21-00003, carried from April 7th with notification needed. Hopefully that notification has been done and we can move ahead.
Yes, Christine checked the notice and it was fine.
It was fine.
I'm going to bring in Vince Dominic,
Who apparently is going to present the
Minor subdivision
application again. I'm going to make him a panelist.
Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. Glad to be back. As Mark
Your panelist,
mentioned,
your presenter.
I am Vincent Dominic. I'm the Franklin Township's Economic Development Director. My offices are located at 475 Demont Lane, Somerset, New Jersey, in the municipal building. As we mentioned, we were here last month. Unfortunately, there was a notice issue. We re-noticed both the 200-foot list and in the newspapers, and as Mark pointed out, the notice was correct. The subject of the application this evening is a minor subdivision of
Mark,
12.
we need to swear you in.
Oh, okay, yes, thank you.
Can you raise your right hand?
Yes,
Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You already gave your name and address for the record. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Clinton. The subject of the application is a minor subdivision of Lot 12 in Block 3702. I will be subdivided into two lots. It's a little over a 4-acre parcel. Lot 12.01 will be subdivided into 2.239 acres, and Lot 1202, 1.8 acres. There's only one variance that is needed. Lot 12.02 will be fully conforming except for there's a 100-foot frontage required on Garden Avenue, and only 50-foot is being done in accordance with the subdivision. The purpose of this subdivision, while not part of the application tonight, and that will be heard at another meeting. Hopefully, our expectation is that we will have a site plan application. The library board will have you in August. The purpose of this subdivision eventually is for the building of a branch library for the library board. Like I said, that is not the subject of the application tonight. The only thing that we're talking about doing this evening is the minor subdivision, breaking the land which is owned by the Board of Education into two lots. The one that the board will continue to own and will be merged into their existing property, and the other lot which will become the property of the library board, and they will build. There is one staff report that was prepared by the TRC. We will conform to each one of the comments. With that said, I would ask Mr. Healy to give some brief comment on the one existing variant, or the one variance that will be created via the subdivision.
And this is a little bit of a deja vu since we
went over this a few weeks ago, but
as indicated previously, both of the proposed lots comply fully with the
requirements of the zone.
One variance that is required is an existing condition. Look at the top portion of the page there where it says Garden Avenue. That is a right-of-way of 50 feet in width. Obviously does not meet the 100-foot width or frontage requirement of the zone. It's basically an existing condition.
And since it's
a new lot, that new lot would also have that existing condition, and that requires a variance
for the minor subdivision.
Otherwise, no new non-conforming conditions
in terms
zoning
of
is being created.
I would add that, as we said last time, it is, in my opinion, a technical variance.
I have no further testimony, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Vince. Does the board have any comment or questions? Again, I do want to emphasize, as Vince already pointed out very clearly, this is just for the subdivision. The site plan will come back before the board. Vince indicates, what, August timeframe, roughly?
Yeah, our expectation is we'll have the application to you in the next month or so, and we would hope to be before you in August with the full site plan, which traffic, stormwater, all the normal stuff that you discuss, will be able, the public will have ample opportunity to ask questions and to have input.
Yeah,
So as usual, as required for any application, it'll be up on the website, answer the meeting, and everybody who's noticed for this subdivision will also be noticed at the site plan application.
Thanks, Mark, for that additional information. So, if the board has no comment, then I'll make a motion to open this hearing to the public. Can somebody second that, please?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting is open to the public on this application only, and please confine your comments to the testimony that was presented on the minor subdivision only, and not any comments related to what might be coming in August, since we haven't seen those plans.
So again, I'll remind the public that if they want to comment, they can press *3 if they're calling in, or do the raised hand
function if they're participating by
WebEx. We do have a few people.
I'm going to go to the call-in.
Ask that you also identify your name, spell your last name,
and identify your address.
Go to
Area code
732-419.
Go ahead. 732-419.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for taking my call.
Go ahead.
This is Anna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking my call. This is Annabelle Alvarez. That's Alvarez. And I live at 60 Clover Place, which is like a couple of lots away from the proposed, from the site that is being subdivided. My only comment now is that I know that the reason for the subdivision is the proposal of a library, and so I guess I'm just asking. I'm not really familiar of the process if the site plan and all the build plans have not been approved or have not been evaluated at this point, that there is still a chance that might be disapproved in the future, and if so, what would happen to the subdivision when that happens? If this was approved, if the subdivision was approved, and the lot would now then be divided into two, which is one owned by the Board of Ed and one owned by the Board of Library, but then when the subsequent application for the actual construction comes through, and you receive enough feedback from the community that this is not the best place for it, then what will then happen to that subdivision?
So
I'll answer the site plan question, and then I think I'll defer to Vince if he
happens to know an answer about the
Subdivision
subdivision and what would happen to the lands. But
The answer to the question about the site plan is that the site plan, you don't have a site plan application yet, but any application before the board, they have to design it in a way that applicable requirements. They'll have requirements for zoning, they'll have requirements for stormwater runoff and grading and a bunch of different things that the engineer is going to have to prove that the site plan functions the
the site plan functions the way it should.
Parking, traffic layout, all of those different things.
All of those different
Possible for me to answer whether the board can approve or deny the application without having one, but all those different factors will be reviewed
when the site
application comes in. As far as the site plan or the subdivision, what happens to the lots if it was to be denied? Vince, would you happen to have an answer to that?
Well,
Yes.
if it was denied, we would not perfect the subdivision. I mean, the library board and the Board of Education would not perfect the subdivision. It would stay one existing lot because, like I mentioned previously, the purpose of the subdivision is for the library to build a building, to build a library building. So if they could not do that, there would be no purpose for them to have and purchase the property.
Okay. And can I do a follow-up question?
Yes.
Right. So, and I hope that when the planning board comes to evaluate the site plan, I hope that they're willing to listen to the community and be able to listen to our thoughts, because I just want to put on record that I personally oppose the building of the library in this area. My primary concern is I do not think it's the best place for a library in this small area that's fully residential that will impact the traffic coming in. And this area is like used by the community. It's like a de facto park. People walk with their kids, with their dogs, and during the pandemic, it has really helped us be more active. And having additional traffic here, I think, will impact that use. So that's the comment I have on that. So I would just implore the planning board, when they come to evaluate this decision, to listen to that call, listen to that part of the aspect. And it's like, I know there might be a need for a library, but I hope we exhaust all our options. The township is big, and I think there are other areas that might already be owned by the township that would better fit the need of a library, if in fact we do need, even with our post-pandemic needs. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark,
Okay.
do you want to go to
We have area code 407718.
Go ahead.
Christopher Brocious, spelled Brosius, 28 Central Avenue. Sir, didn't you say that there was only 50 foot of frontage when it's supposed to be 100 foot? And then you said, well, that's a technical variance. I mean, it's not 100 feet. It's 50 feet. Please disapprove this application. It's too much for too small of a spot. You don't even have meetings in person. Why are we building more buildings? That's what I want to say. Please disapprove this application and any variances or subdivisions.
Jim, do you want to explain why what the term technical variance is and why it applies to this situation in your opinion?
Certainly, I'd be happy to do so. As Mark pointed out, it's an existing condition. Normally, when you have frontage on a street, that's the portion that you access. That's not the case here. This would be the rear yard of the library lot if the subdivision is granted.
Do you have the, can you share it again?
You want to share the map? So it's up at the top of the page, right in the middle of the lot. And I'll just repeat what I said. Normally, a frontage and lot width requirement is based upon the access to the property. And this is not the access. Clover Place is the access. The site will never be utilized through the rear. And that's why I've called it a technical variant.
Sir, this is Chris Brocious again. As the lady so nicely put it prior to me, this is a real big township, and this is something that you're trying really hard to squeeze into a very small patch of woods. And that's why I'm once again going to ask the planning board, please do not approve anything to do with this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark, I think we have one other person, Veronica Avenue.
Evans Avenue?
Yes, can you hear me clearly, please?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the planning board for giving us the time to voice our concerns. I would echo what the other two participants from the public have stated. I do oppose this subdivision. Even though the subdivision itself is innocuous and may look harmless, as Mr. Dominic had said, this is really for the purpose of building a library. So this is the only open space that we have in this area. The development of Route 27 has deprived us and will continue to deprive us of any green space that we may ever hope for. And so we were not also given any time to even review or present alternative sites. We have been trying our best. I personally I've been trying my best to get in touch with the library board of trustees. I've been trying to contact the Franklin Township Open Space program, but everything is tied together. So again, I know the board insists that this is an innocuous and harmless subdivision, but this subdivision really is going to lead to something that's harmful to the neighborhood. I'm not opposed to a library. I love libraries, but to the gentleman's point, why squeeze it into such a small space when there's so much space someplace else? And then also, there are buildings that are being abandoned because of the pandemic. I mean, there's one right there on Route 27, which used to be the school. That's now empty. It's for sale. It's got 11,000 square meters, right? Square feet. So, and it has a yard, it has a playground, it has access. It can rejuvenate that part of the business of the community. So again, I do implore you also, like the other lady, that if you could please listen to us. I know we're a small bunch of people, but we do have a voice, and I think we do have a right to be heard and be given a chance to actually come up with a solution along with the planning board to come up with a win-win solution where the library gets its library and its new building, and we keep the neighborhood that we have right now. So thank you again for for the opportunity to speak to you. And I do really, really sincerely hope you consider our voices, no matter how small they are. Because in this pandemic, that piece of woods helped us to survive a full 14 months of quarantine. You take that away, you deprive all the young starting families that have moved into this neighborhood. You deprive them of being able to walk their children to that park, to that place, that open space. They come in with strollers, they have their dogs, they have their 3-year-olds and their toddlers, and then you have the older generation that's needing to walk, and that open space is vital to our neighborhood. I mean, if you don't live here, it may not seem like much, but it is a lot to us. So this subdivision is the precursor to depriving us of what is helpful for our lives. So thank you again to the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we do have one
Person,
more
if I could just remind
the public to
their hand down
after they're done speaking.
Kirsty Jacobson.
Go ahead. Kirsty Jacobson.
Trustee Jacobson?
The one last
Trustee
time,
Jacobson.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I was muting you on my actual phone, so I apologize. Okay, I'm here.
go
Do you
ahead.
hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm a resident here on 28 Gordon Avenue, and we purchased this house about 2.5 years ago. And when we originally bought this house, we were told that this little patch of wood would never be sold. This is part of the school property, and that was really appealing to us when we purchased this lot. So, like, since living here, I have observed that this piece of land has actually so much wildlife living on it. It's if you don't live here, you don't realize that how tremendously important it is. It has about 20 deers. We easily have 10 deers laying in front of our yards. Some days they roam around. They use this forest to feed, to protect, shelter. And we also have right now family of foxes living here. There's 6 little baby foxes running out of that forest. And this piece of land, I'm just looking around, like, what's around here? And I would have to say that this is an important piece of land. I can't imagine just chopping this land and just making this land smaller for this animal. So I'm a big advocate for animals, and simply for that reason, I please ask you not to use this land. And also there's another observation. There's so this library is being proposed. Like, I'm the same way. I don't mind libraries being built and being around, but there is a Franklin Township library like 10 minutes away. I never understood fully why we can't utilize the library over there. There's a little church right close by. There's the school over here. This is just simply too much traffic being generated. So adding this library will create more traffic, additional what we already have. So it's just mind-boggling a little bit to me that we're adding something extra to this small little area. It's a little residential area. So those are my takeaways.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if I could just ask
again, if you've already spoken to
either put your
down
hand
if you're on
down
WebEx, or
press star 3 again if you're calling in to put your hand down. I
already called in this person.
But their hand's still up, so I'm going to call on them again.
407
718.
already spoken.
Mark, you'll only talk again.
407
718. And nobody's answering.
No, I mean, that is, I believe, Mr. Brocious in that. I think he already spoke twice, so I think we're good. He probably just doesn't have the ability to, or right now, to do that, lower his hand. So, okay, I don't see any new callers. With that being said, I make a motion to close the meeting to the public.
Second.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any final board comment? If not, entertain a motion. Again, this just for the subdivision, which we've heard will not be perfected unless there's a subsequent approval for the library building. So essentially right now, this is a lot line. With, in my view, no de facto planning reason to deny it. So I'll make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
Christine, if you'll call the roll.
Sylvia, Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Carl Howe,
Yes.
Tahir Rafi,
Yes.
Jennifer Ragnow,
Yes.
Charles Brown,
I'm going to say yes, but I would like to add that I understand the concerns by the residents as someone who has walked and biked through that area and seen the wildlife active in that area. I understand, but I'm going to vote yes.
Carol Schmidt,
Yes.
I think you're on mute, Christine, but if you're indicating me, it's yes.
can't hear me?
Faintly. You're not real strong.
Okay, thank you.
All right. On to the next hearing, Balaji Property Solutions LLC, PLN 21-00007.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Mr. Linus, who's the attorney. Mr. Linus, you there?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we can't see you though.
See you though.
I'm pressing start video. There I am. Do you see me?
There you are.
There you are.
Hey,
Right.
it works.
Who else do you have with you tonight?
David Stiers and Pravin Apana. And we previously listed those as potential witnesses at this hearing.
Got it.
Okay, Francis, you're ready to go. If you're ready to go, I'll turn it over to you. We'll go through all your witnesses before we do any board questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an application for, before we proceed, I do represent Balaji Property Solutions LLC. They're the applicant in these proceedings. We did submit proof of publication and proof of public notice, so I would ask the board to accept jurisdiction of this matter. Hello?
That's fine, Francis. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is an application for a minor subdivision with variances in which the applicant is looking to create an additional residential building lot at 23 Wortman Street. The property is known as Block 73.01 in Lot 36, and it's zoned R10. As some of you board members may recall, we received approval of this exact same plan back in 2016. But as we were racing to clear up the conditions of approval, we ran out of time and were unable to record the minor subdivision deed to perfect the minor subdivision. The application that you have before you tonight is the same application that was approved back in 2016. My main witness will be David Stiers. He's of David Stiers Associate. He's a principal there. He's a professional engineer and a site planner, and he'll provide the basic testimony in support of the application this evening. I do have also with me, although I don't intend to call him, Pravin Apana, who's the representative of the applicant, but he's here in case the board or any member of the public has any question regarding the ownership interests in the property, and he's the applicant. And basically, you'll hear the testimony of David Stiers, and he's going to indicate we did receive the TRC report, which was a composite report, and we're prepared to satisfy all the conditions of the unsatisfied conditions of the TRC report, but he does have a couple of comments to make. So without further ado, I'd like to find David Stiers and introduce him.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes.
That's good.
And C.
Mr. Stiles, would you raise your right hand?
It's up.
Now I see you. Do you
Okay.
solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Name and address for the record, please.
David Stiers, S-T-I-R-E-S, 678 Route 202-206 North in Bridgewater.
All right, David, would you give the board and members of the public the courtesy of your background, professional qualifications, and experience?
Yeah, I graduated from Lehigh University in 1985. I worked with a family firm in Somerville for about 18 years and received my license in 1990, professional engineering and planning license. 1990, started my own practice in 2003, and I've been practicing land use and site development for over 30 years.
Okay, and you are a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, are you not?
Yes, and still current, yes.
Okay, and you've prepared many site plans and designed many subdivisions over the years?
I have.
Okay, and have you appeared before boards of this nature?
Yes, and several times in Franklin, not so recently, though.
Okay. I will move
He's accepted.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dave, in your capacity as a professional engineer, a civil engineer, and as a site planner, are you familiar with the municipal land use law and the Franklin Township ordinances that control the development of this property?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And did you and your firm prepare the subdivision plans that are before this board?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, before we start with substantive testimony and show the board what existing conditions are and what we're proposing, you did testify in conjunction with the original approval back in 2016. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And are the plans that are before the board tonight the same plans that were approved back in 2016?
They're relatively consistent. We did perfect some of the requirements of the original approval, including reduction of some of the impervious coverage on the lot and the installation of a fence along the railroad right-of-way.
Very good. Do you have any exhibits you'd like to display to the board and the public?
Sure, I do.
All right. Would you show the board and the public what the existing conditions of the property are? Or?
Mark, do you have to let me share? Oh, okay.
Yep, you should be able to now.
Let me try it. Where did it go? Not taking it. Let me try it. All right, here we go. Nothing?
Nothing.
When you bring up the share tab on the bottom, like we did at the trial run, right? It's dark. You hit the share one, and then when the box comes wherever you saved it, maybe on your desk.
Give me a second. I think I got it now.
Isn't coming up.
Share. Here it is.
There you go.
Okay, now you're getting it.
That's the wrong one. Hold on.
Well, at least you know how to find it now, but that's how you do it.
It keeps grabbing the wrong one. Hold on.
We're getting close.
That's the color rendering. Is that what you shared with me on Monday, right? The
yes.
pink and that it's up. I see it.
You do see it?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Dave, do you want to identify the exhibit, please, for the record?
This is a rendering of the minor subdivision for 23 Wortman Street, dated 2/23/21.
Okay. And using the exhibit as an exhibit, what is the present condition of the property? What improvements exist on the entire lot? Whoa.
It's gone?
Yeah, it's gone. I'm now looking at a tax map. Well, I guess we're all looking at a tax map.
How about now?
It's back.
All right. All right, so the properties on the south side of Amwell Road, also the south side of the old railroad right-of-way, which is on the left side of the rendering in a darker green. Wortman Street is on the bottom of the page, and the old school structure is in tan, kind of in the center of the proposed, or the existing property. There was a large paved area to the south of that building. Some of that's been removed. That was part of an old daycare playground area as well as a parking area. To the north of the existing structure is a maintained lawn area, and then along the railroad, as I indicated earlier, is a new fence that was discussed back in 2016. Due to the elevation change, the board was concerned about the drop-offs, so we installed the fence. Properties in the R10 zone, and at this present time, fully conforming.
Okay. Well, what is the applicant proposing, and what was approved back in 2016?
We are proposing to subdivide the lot into two properties and create an existing lot for the former schoolhouse and convert that to a single-family residence, and then to create a second lot to the north of that for use as a single-family residence. And the applicant intends to file a plot plan at some future date for a single-family dwelling on that lot.
Okay, did the applicant obtain variances with the last approval, and are they the same variances we're seeking tonight?
Yes, there are. There's actually three variances. Originally, the lot frontage on the newly created 36.02, which is the northern lot, is 66.06, where 100 feet is required. And then they have on the north side of the old schoolhouse, they have Bilko doors that are 4.4 feet from the property line, and also stairs from the upper level that come down and encroach or just touch basically the proposed property line. Those steps originally were going to be relocated, and the risers were going to be on the east side of the doorway. We're now proposing just to remove those steps, so that eliminates the one, so to speak, side yard variance. So the other side yard variance is the 4.4 feet for, or basically a flush mounted Bilko door. You know, it's about 6 inches to a foot above the grade. So in reality, it's not a structure that prevents light and air along that sideline.
Okay, without going into great detail, would you provide the justification that was given to the board back in 2016 with respect to those variances?
Yes, there were several comments, and actually John Chadwick was the planner at the time. Number one was the preservation of a historic structure. This structure dates back, I believe, before 1900. It also allows us the ability to remove a non-permitted use. Both the schoolhouse and the daycare are not permitted in the R10 zone. And then John also testified that it kind of eliminates the commercial use of the property by eliminating some of that excess paved area around the old schoolhouse. And to the extent that the new lot is only 66 feet. You can see on the plan that it does diverge in the back. It is a substantially, 10,000 square feet is required in the zone. It is in excess of 15,000. In our original approval, we agreed to set the new house at the same setback as the schoolhouse, and all the other bulk standards will be met relative to the R10 zoning district.
All right, Mr. Stiles, have you had the opportunity to review the TRC memorandum dated 4/26/21 with our client?
I have, yes.
And you've had discussions with our client regarding compliance with the same, is that not correct?
Yes.
All right, and is the applicant prepared to comply with all unsatisfied conditions of the prior approval?
Yes.
Okay, and there are a few comments that require some testimony, so I'm going to ask you those questions. I want you to confirm that the use of the properties will be residential only?
Single-family residential only, correct.
Okay. Can you confirm that the steps to the north of the house are removed or will be removed?
They will be removed.
Okay. Is the applicant preserving existing trees along the property frontage? You want to talk about the tree ordinance?
Yeah, we received a waiver from the tree ordinance because of the existing trees along Wortman Street. And to the extent that the new house, the driveway of the new house requires removal of the two trees there along Wortman, we would agree with the township to work with the town to replace those in some form or manner along Wortman Street.
So we're again requesting the waiver that was granted back in 2016, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think item number 5 of the TRC report involves a question regarding whether there's a dry well on the property. You want to discuss that, please?
Yes, over here, if you can see my hand, on the south side of the existing structure, there is a cover, and it's an extremely heavy manhole lid. We think it is a dry well, and the concern, I think, is that it may be a hazard in the future. What we would propose to do is get that thing opened up. If there is voids down in there, we would propose to install clean stone in there so that the dry well would still function, yet there wouldn't be a void where someone could, drop down in there. So,
All right,
go ahead.
Yeah, do you think a stormwater management plan is necessary?
Now, we've actually reduced the impervious coverage by like about 4,500 square feet on the existing parking area, and that's about what would be proposed for the new dwelling. So to the extent that these are going to be single-family homes, we would respectfully request a waiver from stormwater management on the two properties.
Okay, with respect to the C2 variances that you offered to the board, which were testified to and approved at the 2016 proceedings, do you see any negative impacts either on the zone plan or scheme or the public good if the variances are granted?
No, I think this there's absolutely no negative impacts, and I believe you're going to have two relatively conforming lots. There's one that's 18,000 square feet, one that's 15,000 square feet in the 10,000 square foot zone. And John Chadwick had testified previously, there's 4 or 5 lots in the general area that do have lot frontages in the neighborhood of the 66-foot lot frontage. That's why that tax map was up there, but I'm scared to go grab that again.
Right. So consistent with the municipal land use law for a C2 variance, is it your testimony that based on the engineering principles and site plan design and subdivision design that the positive criteria substantially outweigh any negative criteria?
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, is the applicant committed to attempt to perfect the subdivision by filing the subdivision deed in time, should this board approve this application?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thanks, Frank. And so this is your only witness?
I do have a representative of the owner here, in case the board or the public had any questions of him.
Okay, well, we'll see where that goes. I'll just ask the board if they have any questions for Mr. Stars right now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just with regard to that item 5 in the engineering report, part of the TRC report, it describes the round steel plate, etc. But then it goes on, the applicant should investigate if it is in fact a dry well or if it is something else, such as an old cistern or septic tank. An old structure such as this should collapse and become a hazard. Presumably it is meant that if it's a cistern or a septic tank, it should be properly filled in so that it won't collapse. I would have thought that in the last 4 years you would have investigated that hole, but if you haven't, you haven't.
Jay, do you want to provide comments factually with respect to that issue raised by Dr. Chase?
Dr. Chase, we would agree to close those. If it is not a dry well, close that off. If it's a cistern or other structure, a septic tank, as you indicated.
Okay, just wanted to.
Yeah, my surveyor went out there a couple of times. The thing is several hundred pounds. He couldn't move the lid, so you actually need a machine to get out there.
No.
Any other board questions? So if not, I have one. Frank, it looks like your DNR Canal Commission, it says exempt, dated May 4th, 2016, and the expiration date of this approval was basically this past Monday. So I don't know if you have to go out to DRCC and get another interpretation of it.
I don't think so, since there's no change, but I don't think it would hurt to just communicate with DRCC and make sure that the exemption still applies. There certainly has been no change in the exemption requirements. Has there been, Dave?
No, the regulations have not changed since 2016. So, to the extent they gave an exemption letter, I would think we would be good. But we can touch base with them on that.
Right. I mean, I just think it would be wise, right? Just in case anybody asks, that you didn't willfully neglect the fact that you obviously understand that it expires on May, or expired on May 3rd. The other question I have is roof and gutter downspout. You don't want an exception from stormwater management, which makes sense as a single-family residential small subdivision. Would you be doing any sort of dry wells, or oddly enough, that would come from the that would come from the downspouts and general drainage off the property?
Like I had indicated, we're removing about 4,500 square foot, or we have, and I would suggest to the board that the new house and driveway will be in that neighborhood, so we would ask not to put any stormwater measures in. And this property does drain to the north to the railroad right away, and that's kind of a drainage feature that runs out to the west. So it does not flow over any adjoining properties other than that old right-of-way.
Okay, so the flow is entirely toward that railroad right away.
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman,
if I could just speak to that briefly.
And I'm not indicating any
objection to Mr. Stars. I just don't know if this board has granted
that type of waiver.
Or usually it's the termination
of the engineering department.
If the board wants to take note of it in the resolution, and
then the final decision would be by the engineering department whether the requirement to do stormwater treatment per Chapter 330 should be waived or not, based on the removal of that, previous driveway.
Yeah, at the time they come in for a building permit is when it's typically reviewed. And they have to comply with the township ordinance regarding stormwater. So Mark's correct.
Mark, when will the new stormwater ordinance go into effect?
Well, why don't we talk about that after? Why don't we go into we were working on it, tweaking it last night, actually.
So I can speak
Very soon. Since I'm unmuted, let me just make one comment and one question. I just wanted to remind, I believe the applicant mentioned
these
tax that the minimum required lot area is 10,000. Lots are 15,000
and 18,500
respectively, so they're far in excess of the minimum lot area requirement. And I believe Mr. Stiers may have addressed this as well, but I remember this testimony in the original application, which is the lot area, frontage variance for the one lot of 60, what is it again? 66 feet. If the lot was split in half,
the existing frontage is about 180 feet.
Basically two 90-foot lots, but they chose to move the lot line over to the left to preserve the historic house.
That's correct.
So
I'd say clearly that makes that a
C2 variance.
That's all I have, Mr.
Chairman.
Okay, good point.
Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman,
Mark. Yes.
I have just a few questions. First,
Go ahead.
I'd like to mark what is shown on our screens as Exhibit A1. I would also like, if we could, to qualify Mr. Stiers as an expert in the field of planning. Mr. Stiers, you have a license as a professional planner,
Yes,
and you've testified before other boards in that capacity.
I have.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that he be actually also accepted as an expert in the field of planning as well as engineering.
He is accepted.
Just to validate his testimony, the last question, Mr. Stiers, the benefits to the township in connection with the C2 analysis would be the preservation of a historic structure and the elimination of non-conforming uses?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh,
Any other board questions? Okay, if not, let's open to the public. I move that this hearing is open to the public.
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting is now open to the public for any questions on this application or comments.
Okay, once
And
again,
you can press star 3 if you're calling in.
or do the raised hand function if you're participating via
Webex.
WebEx. We'll ask you
Identify your name, first name, last name,
spell your last name, provide your address. Just give it a few more minutes. We do have some people here, but I don't see anybody raising their hand. Mr. Chairman, I do not see anybody raising their hand.
All right, thanks, Mark. Just giving it a little bit of time, but no, I don't see any movement toward that. So I'll make a motion to hearing to the public.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any final board questions? Frank, any final comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than I'll be brief in my summation. I think this, the same application, substantially the same application we had before tonight was previously approved back in 2016. We just didn't have the minor subdivision deed recorded within the time limits, although we tried. And as the board can see, the TRC report reflects the fact that most, if not all, of the conditions of the prior approval were satisfied. We have an agreement tonight by the applicant to satisfy those conditions which were not satisfied before. And we've requested the reinstatement of the approvals by virtue of the plans that were presented to you in the public this evening. together with the waiver requests and the variances.
So,
Chairman,
Mr.
if I could suggest potential wording for a motion, which would be subject to the conditions of the original approval
as modified by the
TRC
report issued for this application.
Okay, Mark. So if there's no board comment and no further comments, I'll make a motion to approve. Hold on. With the variance for lot frontage, and subject to the prior approval with the updated TRC, with the conditions outlined in the updated TRC report.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that would also include the side yard setback variance.
I thought you said you didn't need that just because of the fact that you're...
No, he still needs the 4-foot side yard.
Oh, okay, well then, with that variance too. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who seconded it? Who seconded it?
I think me and.
Oh, Mahir? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Paul Hauk?
Yes.
Mahir Rafi?
Yes.
Jennifer Ragnow?
Yes.
Charles Brown?
Yes.
Carol Schmidt? I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you. Chairman Orsini?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Frank.
All right, thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay, our last hearing for tonight is AAC TFR Property LLC PLN 210006. And I'll give everyone a few minutes to get everything ready to go.
What was that docket number? I thought Christine said it was 4 rather than 6.
4.
Maybe it is then. Then it's 4. I must have. I probably have the old one.
Well, lucky.
210004.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant. If you are ready, I can proceed.
I'll go right ahead, Peter.
This is an application for site plan approval for a site consisting of 7 acres located in block 517.01, lot 8.06, 401 Cottontail Lane. When we prepared the application, we called out 2 variances. One was for a parking lot setback. You will hear testimony that we will be eliminating that variance, so that one will not be part of our request this evening. The second one is for having 2 signs, as only one is permitted. In all other respects, this will be a conforming application. I do have 4 witnesses, but I believe I can cover everything that needs to be covered in this application with just the site engineer and also the architect. I do have a planner if the board wants to hear from him, and I also have the traffic consultant available. But as you will hear, this application has the adequate number of parking spaces, and the driveways are all in conformance. Having said that, I will call as my first witness Ms. Giordano.
Can she raise her right hand, please? Do we see her?
Hi, I'm here. I think I just have to change the view here.
We see your desk.
Second. Apologize for that.
That's fine. We can see you now. And we can see that you will raise your right hand. Solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Jackie Giordano, 1904 Main Street, Lake Como, New Jersey, 07719.
Ms. Giordano, by whom are you employed
Dynamic Engineering Consultants.
and in what capacity?
I'm a principal with Dynamic Engineering and a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey.
Can you very briefly give the board the benefit of your educational and professional background?
That's okay, Peter. She's accepted as a professional engineer.
Thank you. Ms. Giordano, the plans that are the subject of this application were prepared under your direction?
That's correct.
Okay, and if you can turn the screen over, Mr. Healy, to Ms. Giordano, I will have her review the existing conditions, and then we will get into the site plan.
Okay, she should be good.
The plan that you have up on your screen right now, was that part of our initial submission, or is this a new exhibit?
This is a new exhibit that was submitted and posted on the website.
Okay, and we will have that marked as A1, Mr. Clarkin?
That is fine. How will we describe it?
So this
is an aerial map of the subject property and the surrounding land uses.
Fine.
All right, Ms. Giordano, can you describe the subject property and the surrounding land uses very briefly?
Sure, no problem. And just for orientation purposes for everyone, west will be to the top of the page with north to south from right to left on the page. Like Peter said, this is an aerial map with our property identified in yellow and showing the surrounding area, the industrial area along Cottontail Lane. Our property is specifically identified as block 517.01, lot 8.06. We are located in the business and industry zone, and the property area is approximately 6.05 acres. As I mentioned, we are located on Cottontail Lane, an industrial corridor within the business and industry zone.
Okay.
To the west.
And looking at the property, are there any environmental constraints on the property?
Yeah, so generally the site consists of vacant land. The site, my understanding from historic aerials, was cleared back in the 80s with the surrounding industrial development and the drainage ditch that exists along the western property line. So that drainage ditch that was constructed that lives within a county drainage easement is a regulated water, as we've gotten verified from the NJDEP with a flood hazard verification for the property. We've also identified some freshwater wetlands with our wetlands consultant and are in the process of verifying those wetland locations with a letter of interpretation from the DEP.
Thank you very much. Can you now switch over to the site plan for the subject property?
Sure, and this is a second exhibit.
And this is thank you, Mr. Clarkin. Can you describe what we are proposing to construct?
Sure, so we're looking here now for preliminary and final site plan for a warehouse building. The architect will briefly go through the building footprint with you, but it is a 100,125 square foot building, which includes approximately 4,500 square feet of office space. It's very important to note that this site plan and the building layout was designed to comply with the required use standards, building setbacks, building coverage, building height, and the floor area ratio standards.
Can you indicate how the site will function and operate?
Sure, so the access to the site is proposed with two new full movement driveways along Cottontail Lane. We are proposing to separate the driveways for the car parking area and the truck access. So the southernmost, if you can see my cursor, the southernmost driveway will provide access to the employee parking area, and the northernmost driveway will provide access for truck circulation to the rear of the site, tucked behind the building for the loading operation.
And the area behind the loading operation, are those the areas that are the wetlands?
So wetlands exist primarily in this wooded area that's to remain as a wooded buffer. There are wetlands that we are proposing to utilize the appropriate DEP wetlands permits to fill or modify as necessary for the project.
Now, you indicated that we have two driveways, one for car parking and one for trucks. The car parking, how many parking spaces are we proposing?
We are proposing 62 parking spaces, whereas 59 are required by ordinance.
Okay, and as I indicated in my opening statement, one of the parking spaces violated the front yard setback, is that correct?
Yes, I think the planner's report called out a variance for 48 feet where 50-foot setback is required. We took a look at this, and it's no issue for us to modify the layout to accommodate the plan.
Okay, so basically we're going to slide the parking back 2 feet.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Can you indicate to the board how stormwater management will be handled?
Sure, so under existing conditions, the stormwater runoff runs uncontrolled over land from Cottontail Lane all the way to the drainage ditch in the back. So we're going to continue to utilize grading patterns as much as possible. Our stormwater management design was done in accordance with the Franklin Stormwater Code, with the DRCC and the DEP stormwater management regulations. In fact, our stormwater management design was already reviewed and approved by the DEP with our flood hazard area permit required for the project. Just generally touching on it, stormwater runoff quantity and quality requirements will be met with a combination of an above ground bioretention basins and an underground detention basin. Just to point that out real quick for the board, one of the bioretention basins is located to the southwest of the property, and then one back here to the north orientation. Our underground detention system is to be located under our truck loading area here.
Thank you very much. Are we proposing any lighting on this site?
Yes, so in regards to lighting, we designed it to provide adequate light, particularly in the parking lots and driveways for safety and security measures. We have 16 wall-mounted fixtures around the building and 8 light poles around the parking and loading areas. We are looking for 2 design waivers from the ordinance for lighting in the parking area. Those are exceeding the average to minimum uniformity ratio of 5, whereas 13.4 is provided, and exceeding the maximum to minimum uniformity ratio of 20, whereas 49 is provided. So,
in layman terms, can you explain to the board what that means?
So in some instances, while we do comply with the minimum and average allowable illumination levels, there are some exceedances that created a variance for these uniformity ratios across the parking area. But generally, our lighting design complies with the township ordinance. It will be shielded in accordance with the ordinance requirements. And further, we're proposing LED light fixtures, which are considered high-efficiency, clean lighting fixtures.
And there will be no light spillage from this site onto any of the adjoining properties, correct?
So I'm not aware if there would be no light spillage over, because we weren't able to model some of the features that are on the adjacent warehouse property. But when we take a look at where we are on Cottontail Lane, I don't see any detriment to the character of the neighborhood and any adverse impact to the industrial neighbor that's there.
Thank you. How is waste being handled?
So in addition to the loading docks being behind the building, we have a 10 by 20 trash and recycling enclosure located that would be screened with a board-on-board fence that would not be visible from Cottontail Lane.
Thank you. Can you indicate to the board any proposed landscaping?
Sure. So with the landscape design, we will be removing some existing vegetation for the proposed improvements and providing supplemental plantings and screenings consistent landscape aesthetic that exists along this industrial corridor of Cottontail Lane. So in accordance with the replacement requirement, we'll have a deficit of 525 trees, in which we would be proposing to address with a payment to the Township Tree Fund that's permitted by the Township ordinance.
Okay.
Just to further touch on our landscape design, we have provided some enhancements to the aesthetic along the front of the building, along Cottontail Lane, and the building entrance, as well as fully vegetated those bioretention basin areas. And the rear of the site is to remain a wooded buffer as well.
Thank you very much. You have had an opportunity to review certain staff reports that were generated in conjunction with this application,
That's correct.
and generally we can comply with 90% of all of the comments contained therein. Is that correct?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, and there's a few things we just want to touch on, and I'll try to get through them very briefly. There was a report by the Traffic Safety Bureau. We can comply with that, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. House has issued a report from fire prevention dated April 5th, 2021. After the issuance of that report, did you and your staff meet with Mr. House or have a conversation with him concerning his comments?
We had some conversations with the fire official and are confident we can work with him on addressing his comments.
So they will be resolved. You also had an opportunity to review a report generated by Mr. Healy, dated March 30th, 2021. There are some architectural questions. We will defer on those. Mr. Healy raised an issue in his report concerning non-automotive modes of transportation. Do we have the ability to provide some bike racks on the property?
Yes, so my understanding is the applicant would be willing to comply with the request to provide a bike rack on site.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, there's also the comment, and this is our bi-monthly discussion on sidewalks in the BI zone. We are aware of the ordinance. I've spoken to my client. As you could see from the aerial map that was put into evidence, the prior exhibit, there are no sidewalks in the immediate vicinity. However, if the board wants sidewalks, we would be happy to put them in as per call. I don't know where they will connect to because everything else on either side of us going down that road is developed. So there probably are no opportunities for other sidewalks, but that's up to the board. Like I said, we would be willing to provide that. Will you also be willing to provide the ability to provide charging stations for electric motor vehicles?
Yes, so we can certainly provide the conduit for 2 car charging stations for future use as necessary.
Okay. And I'll leave the issue of pickup and drop off to the architect also. We are going to be providing directional signage, and the directional signage will comply with the township ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Finally, we have the report of the township engineer from CME dated April 22nd, 2021. That consists of, I think it is 9 pages. You reviewed that report?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And other than the issue of the discussion of the sidewalk again and the signs which will be dealt with the architect, everything else in that report we can comply with. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions. I would like to move on to my next witness, Mr. Valenza.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, please do so. Save all questions for the witnesses for whenever your testimony is done.
Do we see him yet?
I do. Or he's waving to us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
All righty. Raise your right hand, sir. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Name and address for the record, please.
Larry Valenza, V-A-L-E-N-Z-A, representing M&H Architects at 12747 Olive Boulevard, St. Louis, Missouri, 63141.
Mr. Valenza, you are a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey,
Yes, I am.
and were you?
He's accepted, Peter.
Yeah, he testified before this board, I believe, about a month and a half ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Healy, if we can turn the screen over to Mr. Valenza, he will briefly go through the building that we intend to construct and address some of the questions that were raised in the reports. Mr. Valenza, the first exhibit that you have there, is that part of the plan set that was originally submitted with this application?
It is. It's sheet PB02 dated 1/21 of this year, 21.
Okay, and
Mark it A1.
it would be A3, I think, Mr. Clark, and I think we had two other exhibits.
Yes.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you. Mr. Valenza, can you briefly take the board through the building, the size, the height, and the materials that will be used to construct the building?
Yes, these are our building elevations. The building is constructed of concrete panels, painted concrete panels. There are reveals cast into the panels to separate the paint colors. And there are three colors, neutral grays, a light gray, a medium gray, and a dark gray. We do that so that no matter who moves in as a tenant, it's a neutral background. It's also neutral to the surrounding area. So, you know, if Home Depot wants to move in with an orange sign, the building can accommodate that, as well as John Deere with a green sign. So the neutral colors seem to work the best on these buildings. We apply the color in blocks. We have some dark gray vertical elements at all the man doors around the building, which tends to segment these buildings. Being larger structures, it helps kind of reduce the scale by breaking it up segmentally. And then we provide larger blocks of the light and medium gray colors within those boundaries. All four elevations have the same exact treatment and color pattern, and all four elevations also have clear story windows as well, which help to provide some rhythm to the elevations and also provides natural daylight within the building, within the warehouse area.
Do you have a colored rendering that shows the building?
I do. Before I go to that, while I'm on this sheet, I'll talk about the signage.
Okay.
We show two wall signs, one facing south, kind of above the entry doors, and one facing east above the office area. That one facing east probably is not as effective there as it could be, and we would suggest that be moved to this face, and I can show you on the renderings why that is. And then, go ahead.
If you want to show it on the renderings, I think it probably would be better for the board to understand why you're moving it.
And then we also have a monument sign on our drawings, and that shows on the rendering as well, but it's designed to match the architecture of the building.
And all of the signs that we are proposing will conform in size, is that correct, and meet the zone requirements?
That's correct. They'll conform in every way. The only variance that we're looking for is to add one of the wall signs.
Okay, let's mark this exhibit as A4, and can you indicate to the board where the signs are going to be?
Yeah, so one sign, the one that faces south, will be up here, and the one that faces east toward Cottontail Lane is currently shown on the elevations here. If you can see my cursor, but this is the location where it'll be more effective and more visible from the road.
Okay, and can you indicate why you feel that two signs are appropriate rather than one that is required by ordinance?
Yes, first, with two signs, no matter which way you approach the building from, on Cottontail Lane, you'll be able to see one of the signs. And there's a potential that this could be a two-tenant building, in which case each tenant would use one of those two signs. If it's a single-tenant building, then the one tenant would use both signs.
So, and this building is designed for perhaps more than one tenant, is that correct?
Possibly. A building of this size is most likely a single-tenant building, but in today's market, but in the future, you know, anything could happen, and they would probably use the same common building entrance and have offices off of that common entrance.
Can you briefly indicate to the board where the mechanicals are going to be located for this building?
Yes, the mechanical units will be placed on the roof, and we make sure that we hold them back one column line or one column grid line in from the perimeter of the building. And with the height of these walls and the parapets and the setback of those units, the parapet wall screens your view from the adjacent roadways so that they're not visible. The roof also can accommodate solar panels if a tenant should desire to put those on, and they would not be visible either. So nothing on the roof will be visible.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my testimony. Like I said, I do have our traffic engineer. He did submit a traffic report. The driveways are fully compliant, and we have the adequate number of parking spaces. If there are any questions that the board may have of the traffic engineer, I'll be happy to call him, but I don't believe there's any direct testimony necessary.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So I'll open it up to see if the board has any questions of the witnesses you've presented so far.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ted, go ahead.
John House, the Director of Fire Prevention, wants a continuous driveway around the building, and he always wants that, and I agree with it. Now, interestingly, in the site plan, at the southwest corner of the area that is to be developed, there's an area of impervious surface that does not seem to have any function, that's behind the bioretention basin that is shown. It doesn't have any parking spaces, and most of it is even beyond the trash receptacles. I would suggest that the bioretention basin be moved further back, eliminating that apparently useless paved area, so that there can in fact be a continuous driveway around the building for fire safety purposes.
Can we have Ms. Giordano bring up the exhibit and turn the screen back to her? And I think she had a conversation with Mr. House, and perhaps she can address your concern, Dr. Chase.
I'd like to know what Mr. House said to her and what she agreed to.
Yeah, why don't we bring up a site plan again?
Yes.
And
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep, Jackie, we've got it.
To answer the first question about one of the comments about this pavement that seems to serve no purpose, it's actually very vital for access to the loading dock positions, specifically the last few loading dock positions for a tractor trailer to come in here and back up into that loading dock position. It needs to utilize the full space of that hammerhead pavement area. So we certainly would not want to look to remove that. However, we did have conversations with John House to make sure that we were taking the right measures to make sure that this was a safe site for fire and other types of emergencies, and provided him with some circulation plans to ensure that that fire truck could access the back of the site and sufficiently turn around as necessary in the event that he would be back there. We are going to be making some revisions to the plan to provide some additional fire lane striping and signage per his request.
How many feet does that hammerhead, as you called it, extend beyond the last loading dock? It seems to me a great deal bigger than would be necessary for a truck to get into the loading docks.
I would say the extension's probably about 100 feet. The tractor trailers are 73 feet in length, the maximum size truck. So that 100 feet is necessary for that truck to back in. The truck circulation plan was submitted with the application showing that maneuver.
Well, I'm not a traffic engineer, but perhaps we can hear from the traffic engineer on that. I wonder, the demolition plan showed only a sampling of trees on the site, which I know is our procedure for calculating how many there are likely to be. But I wondered if there are any substantial existing trees along the Cottontail Road front that you could save rather than cutting them all down and planting new trees. Saving existing trees always looks better.
Of course, and we took that into consideration. We thought it was most appropriate to save the existing vegetation near the most environmentally sensitive areas. Like I said before, the site was historically cleared and really has just since overgrown. I believe it was cleared in the 80s. So, based on my view, I didn't think that there was any significant, mature vegetation along the front that, didn't provide some sort of detriment based on the necessary grading to provide safe access to the site.
You didn't measure trees along the front then?
No, we took, based on the sampling requirements, we looked at the most densely populated areas of trees on the site and where our proposed development was going to be.
I think you had some fairly big trees shown on that plan. Sheet 3 of the plans. In the sampled area, you have a 16-inch tree, a 15-inch tree, two 13-inch trees, a 14-inch tree. So now that, of course, is where you were going to have the driveway to for the truck. But I wondered if there were any of that size in the rest of the wooded area along the street.
I'm not sure. We just sampled the 100 by 100 acre plots that's required by the.
So you don't know whether there are any trees of over 10 inches diameter at breast height in the rest of the street frontage.
That's correct.
Dr. Chase, we can take a look at that, and if there are any trees that can be saved, we would be happy to do it. Obviously, there has to be some grading there, but if there's an ability to save a tree, I am sure my client would do that.
I hope so. The signage, what was shown, what Mr. Valenza showed for the south-facing sign on the rendering, it looked as if a good deal of the sign would actually be obscured by the slightly lower part of the building, the office part of the building, and therefore would not be very functional. But also, I think on the plans you show the monument sign by the truck entrance, and in the rendering it was shown by the car entrance. I think it ought to be by the truck entrance. Otherwise, a truck coming to the site that hasn't been there before will go sailing past the truck entrance and only know where the building is when they're well past the truck entrance.
Do we have a problem, Jackie, putting the monument sign by the truck entrance? Can that be accommodated?
I think our preference is to have the monument sign as described by our architect in the location where it is. As we're approaching the site, we want it up close to the beginning of the site, one way on Cottontail Lane. But I will add that we will certainly be having some directional signage on site, specifically to, as pointed out in the police letter, to denote where the truck entrance will be to prevent an instance like you were mentioning.
Yeah,
Dr. Chase, if you want to set, perhaps it makes sense to have even a smaller second sign by the truck entrance, identifying the address and truck entrance. If the board doesn't have an objection, maybe that's the answer.
well, I certainly think that having a sign there is necessary, because if a truck is coming to make a delivery and hasn't been there before, they need to know that that's where they need to go.
So our site plan, just for the record, shows a directional sign at that truck driveway.
But notice, according to township requirements, you can't have a logo on a directional sign. A directional sign would just say entrance.
What I think, and Mr. Healy can opine if he thinks it's a variance, maybe we just put the street address, the street number, and say truck entrance at the truck entrance, so a trucker would know that's the address he's going to. I don't think we necessarily need to put the name of the company, but we could put the street address and truck entrance, and I think that may solve the problem. And I don't know if technically that's.
I think that would solve the problem.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, Ted makes a good point, is that, something to distinguish the truck entrance from car parking, most critical. So, yeah, that sounds like a good solution, Pete. Ted, do you have anything further?
Well, I'm concerned that there are, the engineer has some 52 comments on the stormwater management part, in the stormwater management part of his experiment, and some of which I think are quite considerable comments, and I really wish I could see a plan that is revised to meet his comments. For instance, something about the size of the storage volume for the underground detention basin is computed for 62-foot wide by 215 feet long by 2.5 feet high tank. However, in accordance with the storm trap detail provided on sheet 14, the overall basin is only 38 feet 9 inches wide. That's a rather large discrepancy.
Yes, and if I could chime in real quick just to clarify that, the tank, this underground basin, the size of that's been documented in our stormwater report and in the grading plan does match and is, I believe it's a 62-foot dimension. There is just a discrepancy on the detail which we need to coordinate with the manufacturer of that storm system. I will go further. We acknowledge that there were a lot of comments with the stormwater design. We've reached out to CME, walked through that in pretty good detail, and are confident that we can certainly address all of their comments.
And you're going to have the underground detention basin underneath the loading area. So there'll be a lot of trucks on top of it. You'll have sufficient support for all of the trucks?
That's correct. We have a concrete system proposed.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll as Pete, as you well know, right? It'll all be subject to the satisfying staff reports and the engineers' reports, and I assume that if there's any changes to the plan that are material as a result of those discussions, you'd have to come back. So,
We are aware of them, Mr. Orsini, and we did have discussions with staff, both CME and John House, concerning their comments. And if there were requests by them which would have resulted in us having to make substantial changes to the plan, we would have amended the plan, come back and not come in tonight with this application. But all the changes we've discussed with staff, we can comply with them, and they don't in any way substantially alter what you're seeing before you this evening.
okay. So I had a couple of quick comments, some of which Ted touched on. I would encourage, to the extent possible, and there may not be much of an extent possible, because your site is what it is. It's a very large warehouse on a, kind of very defined piece of property with wetlands limitations in the back. You may not have an ability to plant more trees on site, but to the extent that you could, we'd prefer that, as you know, over the contribution. But whatever, less than 556 or whatever the number is that you can't plant on site, you've agreed to contribute to the Township Shade Tree Fund. The wetlands in back, it was mentioned that they may be filled or modified. If you're going to leave those as woods, why would you need to fill or modify them if they're going to be delineated freshwater wetlands? I assume you really won't touch those. Is it a matter of grading or drainage, or how does that untouched area, or seemingly forested green area in the back where all the wetlands are, how does that get treated?
Sure. So we are keeping the majority of the stream corridor for that point undisturbed. But for purposes of drainage, like you mentioned, you can see this little cleared area down towards the drainage ditch. We want to have a controlled system that pipes our outfall, has positive relief down to the drainage ditch. So there will be some permits necessary for wetlands and flood hazard, which I mentioned was approved already.
Right.
Mike, there are shown some small isolated wetlands in the area that is to be developed. So that's what I'd figured that reference was to. And
yeah.
The DEP allows filling of small isolated wetlands like that.
Right. I was more concerned with more substantial ones in back, and obviously that's part of that creek system. I guess it's Randolph Creek, right? So.
Well, it's a tributary to Randolph Brook. Randolph Brook is the other side of the property behind.
Right. But I mean, yeah, as long as it's, okay. I just wanted to understand that. For your lighting, I'm glad to hear it's LED. I'm glad to hear there's no spillage. I think a condition of approval will be, there will be no spillage. Design waivers, I don't know why things need to be so bright. I'm not a lighting engineer. Don't want to be, don't want to pretend to be. But it sounded like there were some pretty high numbers there. And so, I really wanted to make sure that it's shielded, downward facing, limited to the site. I haven't necessarily heard a justification that I feel, good about in terms of the design waiver for that particular lighting. I understand across the site you'll be compliant, but where that lighting is to be significantly brighter than township standard, I haven't really heard a reason why it needs to be. Can anybody help me with that?
So in my opinion, I'm looking at, adverse impact to neighbors when I'm looking at that deviation in particular. We're up against an industrial parking and industrial building in between us. I don't see any substantial detriment to our neighbor in that regard.
Yeah, but the question I'm asking, Jackie, is why they need to be brighter. I understand you don't think that the fact that they will be brighter adds to any detriment, and you may well be right. Just why I don't understand why they need to be brighter.
We can certainly, if the board requests, take a look and try to modify the lighting a little bit so we have a little bit lower illumination levels, but we're not exceeding any maximum point foot candle illumination requirements. It's just when we're looking at an average.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would be great if you could take a look at that, and I mean, just provide some justification for why in those areas that you so indicated during your testimony that they needed to be that bright. I think that was all I had. I think Ted touched on the rest. Any other board comments? One more thing. Sidewalks. As Peter mentioned, there aren't any other sidewalks and probably no other opportunity to put them in this area. So you'd have, even if the applicant is willing to construct one, to be a sidewalk to sort of nowhere. I would argue for the contribution to the sidewalk fund instead, so that we can perhaps fill in areas where in recent times in applications on Elizabeth and elsewhere that we have wanted sidewalks and may have an opportunity to fill in gaps that we wouldn't otherwise have, rather than put them in front of this site with no opportunity to extend them further. And that's, I think, all I have to say.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have two questions of Ms. Giordano and one comment, if I could.
Please.
Ms. Giordano, just following up on the light illumination issue. If the waiver is granted, will it affect public safety in any way?
No.
With regard to the electric vehicle charging stations, you mentioned that the conduit would be installed, but we also installed the actual stations themselves.
Mr. Clarkin, our thought was that we'd have it available. Again, the concern you have, if there is no need for the charging stations, then you have charging stations and you're taking away parking spaces that are then not being able to be used by anybody. We will make them available, and again, as we get a tenant in there, if the tenant has a need for the charging stations, we would put them in. If they don't have a need for them, you would then be losing parking spaces because they're set up for charging stations, and there's no desire, or the employees don't need them, and then we've wasted those parking spaces. So we will make it available, and depending on the user, if they need it, we'll have it available.
I pointed out to the board for its consideration. They can determine whether or not they want them at the time. My comment is that we did not have a plan or testify to justify the variant. However, it's nominal in nature, and I think you can use your common sense in making a determination whether to grant or not. You have a reason that on its face seems appropriate, that it will provide a quick identification when approaching the site in each direction.
Right, and I do have Mr. Palis here if the board wants to hear planning testimony, but again, I think Mr. Clarkin hit the nail right on the head. It's readily apparent as to the reason for the variance.
Well, now that you don't need the variance for minimum front yard setback, I would agree. I don't think we necessarily need to have planning justification for the building mounted signs. Is that all you had, Jim?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Any other board comments?
I'll just one note on the building mounted sign variance, which is if they adjusted the architecture to put a door on the side of the building facing the road, they not need that variance. So
I would say that architecturally, what they're doing is really no different than what if they put that front entrance office, they could have doors kind of on either side. If they did that, they'd be allowed to have a sign
on the front and also the side. So I think that variance has no impact.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. So I'll make a motion to open the hearing to the public.
Mike, could I say a couple more things?
Yeah, quickly. It should be.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, I think they should put in one charging station and have a conduit more, because government plans are to greatly increase the number of electric vehicles over the next 10, 20 years. And if this happens, it will be desirable to have a number of charging stations, because people will want to come and charge their car while they're at their place of work, particularly if they can't charge them at home. And you really need to plan not just for this year, but for the next couple of decades. I'd also ask whether it's been considered putting porous paste in the car parking areas to reduce the runoff, and whether there's any consideration been given to having a green roof, which would reduce the heating and cooling needs for the building, as well as reducing the runoff.
The issue of the pervious pavement, we are well under the impervious coverage requirements of the zone. We have designed, as you heard from Ms. Giordano and her discussions with your engineers, the stormwater management system to handle all of the runoff. So it was our feeling that pervious pavement wasn't necessary and or appropriate. With respect to the green roof, we felt it was more appropriate to make the roof available for solar panels rather than for a green roof. And then, again, we are able to handle all of the clean water from the roof in our stormwater management system.
Okay, I just asked. The Environmental Commission bugs me about particularly green roofs.
All right, thanks, Ted. I happen to agree with your comment about the charging stations. I think we need to start planning more for the future, and so let's have at least one that's functional, and the conduit can serve others in the future. But I think asking for one now is reasonable.
We have no problem with that.
Okay, so I renew my motion to open the meeting to the public.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting is open to the public for comment on this application. Mark, you can let me know.
Yep. Okay, so to the public, if you're calling in, you can press *3, or if you're on WebEx, you can do the raised hand function. And I'm not seeing any takers, Mr. Chairman.
Where am I? Seeing no one coming forward, I make a motion to close the meeting to the public.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Peter?
Very briefly, again, we've eliminated the one front yard variance. We've talked about the other variance. Everything else is conforming. I think it will be as attractive a site as you can get. Obviously, warehouses are warehouses, but we've taken great pains to make it attractive. And we have met all the requirements of the ordinance, and I would respectfully request that approval be granted. We will look to preserve whatever trees we can preserve, and we have no objection to putting in your charging station and contributing to the sidewalk fund. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. No further comment from the board. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval with the various conditions that have been agreed to, and there were variants for 2 signs.
And then why don't you just add to that motion in compliance with all staff reports?
Yeah, of course.
I'll second that.
Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Oral House,
Yes.
Mahir Rafiq,
Yes.
Jennifer Ragno,
Yes.
Charles Brown,
Yes.
Carol Schmidt,
Yes.
and Chairman Orsini.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Have a
Have a
great
good-
night, Peter. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of Cinco de Mayo.
All right. Mark, do we have any other business?
No, just to remind Councilman Chase that the stormwater ordinance
Is
forthcoming very soon. Done, it's done.
Are you sending it to the county before introduction by the township or after?
That's actually the one last detail that I need to find out. Actually, literally during the meeting, sent an email to Walter Lane asking for him to call me tomorrow, so I can find out exactly what the process is.
Good.
So, one last thing before we adjourn. A little homework, very easy homework for the board. It's been brought to my attention, Bob Thomas and I were talking about this the other day. It's been a long time since we've had a work session. And I think that there's some things that have come up, I think, in the last few months that, if we don't want to be reactive and be more proactive, looking to, we've had a lot of warehouses. Are we doing all we can to repurpose or allow planning and zoning to repurpose what we already have to fill office buildings that may never be filled with employees again who can work completely remotely? The electrical vehicle charging that we discussed tonight is another perfect example. Are we doing all in the sort of design portions of ordinance to encourage things that will be more so in the future than they are now, and especially with related to post-pandemic way of life. A lot of warehouses, a lot of things online, flex office space. Are we doing all we can to, encourage repurpose of sites that are going to be otherwise empty? I think there's some things that are going to come before the board that are going to fulfill some of that, but I'd like us to start thinking and planning for that. And, I had a conversation with Mark today about maybe if we have a light meeting with a very light application or two, it might be minor subs that we would just take the rest of the meeting and do a work session. So the homework is, think about anything that is near and dear to your heart in terms of that kind of planning so that we can discuss that in the future, because it's dawned on me, as it probably has on all of you, that the way we live is somewhat going to be permanently altered. We've discovered we can do a lot of things remotely that we didn't think we could do, and online shop and things of that nature. And I want to make sure that we are planning as much as possible. That's the fun part of being on the planning board, is not sitting here till 10 o'clock hearing warehouse applications. It's actually planning. So let's try to do some of that in the near future. That was the idea.
Yeah, and Mike,
Christina and I went over the future agendas. We have another application.
I forget the nature of it, but
Next
the
meeting in May.
But the 2 meetings in June are both open at this point. So I think we could
Find an
definitely
opportunity
in June to have that work session.
Sounds good. All right. Well, with that, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your Cinco de Mayo.
What do you do with them?